Have you seen these apartment buildings popping up in your city? I was in Minneapolis last summer and they were everywhere. And every one of these buildings is always advertised as a luxury apartment. In my home state, I have seen them predominantly in the city, and this piqued my interest. I started wondering why these buildings have popped up in every major city. Why do they all look the same? Why are they all advertised as luxury apartments with a $3,000 price tag? Who is living in these buildings? And in the middle of an affordable housing crisis, why is every new building a luxury apartment instead of an affordable apartment? So in this video, I'm going to attempt to answer all these questions because I did a little bit of investigation to kind of try and understand why we're here. We have so much to cover. Someone suggested that I buy a pop filter because the audio in my other video was not the best. So here I am with a pop filter. Let's try it and rate it 1 through 10. If you didn't know, there is an affordable housing crisis in the US. Most people right now cannot afford to buy homes, so they're choosing to rent. But choosing to rent comes with its own obstacles, and one of those obstacles is the price point. Even though developers are busy building thousands of apartments every year to catch up with the housing demand, these newer buildings are still not affordable for the average person. A lot of them, as I mentioned previously, are marketed as luxury apartments, and they usually cost between $2,000 to $5,000 a month. The apartment price usually varies by your location, so if you're somewhere in New York City, these luxury apartments could cost you anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000 a month. I would not want to live in New York City because the whole apartment hunting process seems very stressful and tedious. Whenever I watch a vlog of someone who is apartment hunting in New York City, every time they try to explain the process, my brain literally short circuits because I'm like, you have to go through all of that just to find housing. It's becoming ridiculous. That's a bit much. It is a bit much. Because of how expensive these luxury apartments are, a lot of people have roommates. And if you're someone who is lucky enough to have a wonderful partner who you can split the bills with, then that is also another option in order to have affordable housing. But before we talk about why we're only seeing luxury apartments being built in every major city, we need to understand why we currently have an affordable housing crisis. Between 2020 and 2021, the housing market was hot. People were buying homes right, left, and center. At the time, everyone was scared that the housing market would crash because the world had just stopped. But that didn't happen. What ended up happening was the housing market was getting hotter and hotter and hotter by the day. People were buying up homes. Dana George from The Ascent speculates that because the interest rates between 2020 and 2021 were so low, people were buying homes aggressively, and that led to a low inventory of available homes. A lot of people at the time were working remotely. They didn't need to report to the office. They did not have to do long commutes, and because of that, it was the perfect time to invest in owning a home, especially if you had enough savings and a good credit line to get a mortgage. All these things compounded, and that's how we ended up with such fierce competition between individual buyers, and that created high demand in the housing market supply. As we all know, high demand and low supply usually means that the price of something will go up significantly. That's why houses are so expensive right now. Nowadays, if you want to buy a house, you need to have a down payment. I'm not sure that anyone will be competitive in this housing market if they don't have a lot of money to put down. I'm sure there's exceptions, and I'm sure there's people who are doing just fine without having a down payment. But from what I've seen, a lot of new buyers usually have some money saved up, either from working or having a family member help them out with a down payment. Dana George further explains that because there were far more buyers and sellers, developers had to start building again in 2021. But they were also dealing with supply chain and inventory problems. Because of the supply chain and inventory issues that had happened during the lockdown, the cost of building materials had gone up by almost 20%. And in this world, we all know that nobody wants to spend a lot of money just to end up losing all that money. So these developers were looking for ways to line their pockets. A lot of them turned their focus into building new luxury apartments instead of making more affordable apartments because there was no money to be made in building affordable housing. Mind you, when they were building these luxury apartments between 2020 and 2021, we were already dealing with an affordable housing crisis. On top of individual buyers competing against each other because the interest rates were so low, corporate investors who had so much money were also buying up these homes. In another article that explains why the housing inventory is so low, Jess Ulrich found that these investors accounted for more than 13% of all residential real estate purchases in 2021. These sneaky institutional investors found the perfect time to buy up these homes and lock in at an interest rate as low as 2%. I can only imagine how tough it is to be competing in a market with other individual buyers. And then when you add these institutional conglomerates into the mix, I can't imagine how bad it was and how bad it still is because these institutions have so much money, they have so much backing, they have so many investors. So when you're coming in with your savings that you've probably saved up for 5 years, a decade, and it's still a fraction of the amount of money they have to be able to buy up these homes, I can't imagine how hard that is and how discouraging that can be. Imagine you found your dream home, you're ready to go, you put your down payment, and then a conglomerate comes in with $100 billion and just buys the house in cash or puts so much money down that you can't even compete with that, you know? If I was purchasing a home in that kind of market, I would be crying every day because how can you even compete? It's very sinister. On top of the housing market being so competitive, the US itself does not have enough housing. There's a low inventory. That's why it's even more sinister when these big conglomerates, these big institutional investors are buying up all these homes. According to Anna, a business and finance news reporter, the US has fallen behind by about 5.5 million housing units over the past 20 years as builders fail to keep up with historical building trends. If you add in property destruction due to demolition or natural disasters, among other things, the total shortfall could be 6.8 million during that time. This is a gap so deep that it would take more than a decade to catch up. But even if more homes and apartments are built, it won't matter unless people can afford them. These new buildings that are being built are so unaffordable, so what's the point of building them if people can't afford them? Millennials and Gen Z are being priced out of home ownership. The average American does not realistically make enough money to purchase a $400,000 home. That's how much homes are going for right now, which is insane to me. In 1980, the average household income was $21,000. When adjusted for inflation, $21,000 in 1980 is $81,000 in 2023. The average single-family house in 1980 cost $64,000. Guess how much this is in 2023 when adjusted for inflation? Pop quiz. Guess how much? I dare you. Don't look it up. Just guess, put it in the comments. If you can't guess, I'll tell you. $64,000 in 1980, when adjusted for inflation in 2023, is $250,000. Can you imagine buying a single family home in 2023 for $250,000? And I'm talking about a single family home that is in good condition, pristine. You can move your things in the same day. It's ready to go. You don't have to fix anything. The Census Bureau claims that the average American household made $74,580 in 2022. The average house nationwide costs $430,000 I wanted to see what a household making $74,000 could afford because that's what the average American is making, right? So I went to Bankrate's website because they have this home affordability calculator and I put in some numbers. First number being the annual gross income of $74,000. The second number is the monthly debt that people have. And this number is an assumption and an estimation that I'm making based on how much people are paying for their student loans, as well as maybe a car payment or a car note. The third number is the down payment. That is also an estimation. So as we can see, a household that is making $74,000 can afford a home that costs $221,000 on the low end and $285,000 on the high end. That means that the average American cannot afford a $430,000 home. So the dream of owning a home is slipping further and further away from the average American, and it's becoming scary. It's becoming scary because a lot of people in America have grown up being told that the ultimate dream, the ultimate way to be successful in life is to own a home. And of course, this is not true for everyone. It's just one of those things that is so mainstream that people feel bad when they don't own homes at a certain age. You know, it's like one of those things that you have to accomplish. Recently, I've been thinking about this and kind of challenging that idea of home ownership and why we feel so inclined to own a home. Of course, there's so many benefits to home ownership, but I don't know if it's a dream that I want to keep having. In 2023, a luxury apartment is essentially any new development that has amenities included. That's pretty much what it is. The selling point for a lot of these luxury apartments is the amenities. They usually advertise amenities such as saunas, rooftops with pools, Olympic-sized swimming pools, fitness centers, high-speed Wi-Fi, valet parking, in-unit laundry, parking garages if you live in a city, and so much more. The list goes on. The target demographic for these luxury apartments are people who usually earn a lot of money. But then, how many people realistically earn a lot of money for every new development to be a luxury apartment? It's not making sense. Are these buildings just sitting there empty because no one can afford to live in them because they're so expensive? Juliana Lumach from House Digest explains that 400,000 new apartments were created in 2022, but all of these apartments were luxury apartments. What's interesting to me is that some tenants don't think that these luxury apartments are worth the money. A renter from Juliana's article said that they submitted 30 maintenance requests in a year because their apartment came with so many problems. And that's so crazy because this is a new building. It should be ready to go. It should be smooth running, especially if you're charging an arm and a leg for rent. There should be no reason for a tenant to submit 30 maintenance requests. That's a bit much. These buildings are probably built with the cheapest materials and they probably bring in the cheapest appliances that they can find so that they can make a profit. They're probably cutting corners. I don't know. I don't work in construction, so I don't know, but I have an inkling. I don't have proof, but I have an inkling that they're using the cheapest materials they can find. I'm sure the interior of these apartments looks so nice and lovely, but if the developers are cutting corners in order to build buildings as cheaply as possible, then the person who suffers the consequences is the tenant, because there is no reason that a tenant should be submitting 30 maintenance requests in a year for a building that is practically brand new. Emma Ockerman from Vice News claims that 80% of the buildings that were built in 2020 were all luxury apartments that no one could afford. It's gotten to the point that cities are now having to add regulations that force developers to add a certain number of affordable housing units whenever they make new buildings. But this is obviously not going to fix the affordable housing crisis that we're currently in. Something else that I've noticed about these new luxury apartment buildings is that they all look the same. Some people think that they're ugly, but me personally, I don't think that they are ugly per se. They just don't look real. They look like Lego blocks to me. That's what it looks like. They look like if someone took gray and orange Lego blocks and just put them together and built something. They don't look like a real building that people live in. I know people live in there, but also do they? I don't know. I don't know. Anna Code wrote an article titled America the Blend, where she discusses why all these buildings look the same. In her article, she mentions that when brownstones were first built in cities, a lot of people hated them, but now people love them and people seem to think that they bring a unique charm to their own cities. So maybe in 60 years or so, people living in the future will enjoy these buildings and think that they're unique and magnificent. Anna claims that a handful of real estate developers are now managing a disproportionate share of new projects across the country. In 2021, 5 of the 25 largest developers were responsible for starting construction on nearly 47,000 units in the United States. So it seems like the same developers are getting all the contracts in the country. It's the same two people building these buildings. It's the same two people developing these buildings across the nation. That's how we lose uniqueness, and that's how we end up here where we're seeing the same 5 buildings in every city. In addition to developers wanting to make a profit, something else that is affecting new construction for these developers is local zoning laws. Unfortunately, your city is probably to blame for why we have an affordable housing crisis today. Dana George explains that some zoning laws require a neighborhood lot to consist of one single family home, even if it could easily accommodate 2 or more. Zoning laws are also responsible for the number of areas that don't allow construction of multifamily properties like apartments, condos, townhouses, or duplexes. New multifamily housing units would not only offer more buying options, but more units would also drive down the cost of rent as landlords compete for new tenants. In conclusion, we have an affordable housing crisis. I'm not really sure what the solution is. I think the first step is becoming aware and talking about it and trying to see how we can get involved with our local governments, because that's how small change starts, right? And I personally believe that housing is a human right and everyone should be able to have a roof over their head. Let me know what your thoughts are. I'm very interested in hearing other people's perspectives. With that, I am going to go now because I've been talking for so long.